evening. Welcome to Around the World with Dee and Friends. Tonight we are going to be talking about good old Joe Biden. His
That
fake
prick.
empathy. Exactly. And I've been hearing that phrase a lot. And how Israel has no moral legitimacy. And I think we all know that anyway, but we're going to
They
talk about
haven't
it.
had any moral legitimacy in the 76 years of occupation.
No. The ruthless gangs, it was vicious. Viciousness. Hi, Andy. It's great to see you.
Always great to see Andy in the crowd.
Yes, it is. So how you doing, Greg?
About as good as I'm going to get.
So, Greg's going to start us off with...
I seriously don't see how the hell there's even any moral legitimacy in this. I don't see where there's even a shred of moral legitimacy.
No.
But we've been saying, since we started this show a year and a half or so ago, that this was going to happen and all that. We called this right out the gate. We said that there was going to be a mass genocide. But with Biden's fake empathy, I don't see where he could be taken seriously at all.
And he's a Zionist. He knows what their agenda is. He's got Blinken as his foreign policy guy for his whole career, mostly. And Blinken's got the Zionist, a big Zionist background in his family.
He's also got dual citizenship with Israel. I did find that to be very, very bewildering.
That is bewildering.
I don't understand how any U.S. politician can hold any sort of citizenship with any other country.
That's what bothers me, is when you see the loyalty. I wonder what that is. With Zionism, the loyalty in his whole cabinet, that there are a lot of countries out there, and if it was another country, I think people would have a fit. Somebody, showing total loyalty and putting some other country before everybody else, I think they would have a fit. But it's okay with Israel. It's like they bowed down to it. And Israel really is occupied Palestine because they're occupying Palestinian land and trying to take it all.
Yeah, and all of this got started, there was a 29-year roadmap between 1917 and 1947 on how to do it, which was started with the Balfour Declaration, which was signed by the British government to send all Jewish people to Palestine and then later occupy it. I find it ironic how they have become the very thing that they ran away from all across Europe.
Yeah.
They've got this Zionist indoctrination, which is give them a very false sense of entitlement to a country that was never theirs. What George Galloway said he asked this Zionist 4 times, what right do you have to occupy a country that was never yours to begin with?
Exactly. What right do you have?
What gives them any right to sit there and try to stake claim over a country that's not even theirs, that was never even theirs to begin with.
No. But they somehow try to bring up mythology.
Yeah, they try to invoke religious indoctrination into the whole grand scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
But that also, like, brings us into tonight's first article. And this is from the Palestine Chronicle, where we discuss where they are on the brink of famine, where Gaza's floating pier in Biden's fake empathy, which he has no shred of empathy for anybody.
No.
Like, he's held political office for 50 years. What? And there's a good question here. Was Blinken sincere on November 3rd when he called on Israel to kill less civilians and increase humanitarian aid to Gaza? Or was he blowing smoke up people's ass? I think he was blowing smoke up people's ass.
I think so too. And the wording of things, I've seen people comparing it to when they were talking about Ukraine and Russia, how it's completely different.
Yeah, that's like comparing pineapples to oranges. Gaza is teetering on the brink of famine. At least 27 children, including many newborns, have perished due to the severe shortage of essential nourishment, particularly baby milk. Additionally, hundreds of adults and elderly individuals have lost their lives as a result of Israeli attacks while waiting for aid trucks at various drop-off locations throughout Gaza. The most recent incident occurred on March 19th in central Gaza, where Israel fired at hungry people rushing at a food truck at trucks at a distribution site, which was a death trap.
Right now, could you imagine if Russian soldiers did that to Ukrainians? How the media would go nuts over it?
They would be going completely ape shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the international community is impotent to pass a UN security resolution to compel Israel to allow entry for food trucks, and yet the Biden administration had pleaded on November 3rd for Israel to allow an immediate ceasefire in humanitarian aid into Gaza. The same press conference, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called on Israel to do more to protect Palestinian civilians, which they have not done.
No, nobody holds them accountable.
Like, nobody holds the Biden-Harris administration accountable for their role in this. As of November 3rd, there was no starvation in Gaza. The death toll was less than 8,000. Here we are in the 5th month, and the number has surged by 400%, if not more, with 20,700 being women and children and 2.4 million humans facing famine. Since Blinken urged Israel to protect civilians, the number of Palestinian children killed in Gaza has surpassed the total from all world conflicts in 4 years. Was Blinken sincere on November the 3rd when he called on Israel to kill less civilians and increase humanitarian aid to Gaza? Or was he trying to blow smoke up people's ass?
I think he was blowing smoke.
Yeah. The result is self-evident. The Biden administration was buying time for Israel on 2 fronts. Firstly, leveraging the genocide to pressure Arab countries, notably Saudi Arabia, into rewarding Israel with normalization in exchange for halting the slaughter. Biden, as well as Blinken, are obsessed with outdoing Trump by orchestrating the largest prize in normalization between the Zionist state and a major Arab country, which that's not going to happen anytime soon. For the Biden administration, the lives of Palestinians are deemed expendable in his pursuit of delivering Saudi Arabia to Israel. That's the Greater Israel Project there. The U.S. wielded its veto power at the UN Security Council as a bargaining chip in its negotiations with Saudi officials. Consequently, Saudi Arabia featured prominently in Blinken's numerous visits to the region during the final 3 months of 2023. However, once Saudi Arabia decided to shelve the normalization file, the Saudi Arabia was among missing from the itineraries of high-level American officials. This week, Blinken is reviving his attempt visiting Saudi Arabia again to find ways to appease Netanyahu for a temporary pause in his genocide. While the world watches famine creeping in on Gaza, the Biden administration is pulling all of its stops to exploit Palestinian suffering and reward Israel for its crimes. In response to earlier failures to American efforts to placate Netanyahu with the Saudi normalization, Israel grew even more obstinate and bolstered the arrogance of its racist government coalition by rebuffing U.S. calls for a ceasefire to permit adequate number of aid trucks into Gaza. In this context, Biden's decision to dispatch the 7th Transportation Brigade expeditionary to construct a floating pier in Gaza could be interpreted as essentially waving the white flag to Netanyahu and to kiss his ass in Washington. The U.S. troops departed from their post on Virginia on March 12th and are anticipated to reach the shores of Gaza in approximately 4 weeks. It will then take an additional 4 weeks to construct the 550-meter floating pier before it can receive shipments. This means it will be roughly 60 days before starving Gaza is in a position to receive aid via the sea, while land access is blocked by Israel. It's worth noting that Gaza previously had a small port that they could have received shipments of food if Israel had not destroyed it over again. Similarly, over 2 decades ago, Israel also demolished a newly built Gaza airport. In fact, these unnoticed Israeli destroyed facilities, which meant to free Gaza from Israel control, along with the 18-year total blockade, are the main impetus that led to the hyperbolized, unprovoked October 7th revolt against the guard of the world's largest populated open-air prison. So we know what's going on here. And it just pisses us off. 60 days, seriously? The whole population of Gaza could be wiped out by then.
It's infuriating. It's infuriating. And you're seeing, like you mentioned earlier, the Greater Israel Plan, you're seeing everything.
Exactly. Like, we see this shit plain as day. Like, if they are going to have to wait another 60 or more days, it's going to be too late. Too little, too late.
No respect for human life at all. This is disgusting. It's appalling.
It's
That they,
fucked up.
it is. I mean, day in and day out, this is how people have to live. And they shouldn't have to. I mean, I think this should be done to the people residing in Israel. Let them see what it's like. They're all hooped up for it. Let them see what it's like to starve. No, there's no coming out of this. Israel, they're always going to be looked at as a pariah, as Israelis are going to be looked at as evil people. That they
And those who
do this.
and the countries that have supported and aided and abetted in this are also going to be looked at as pariah states.
Yes, they are. I mean, this is just evil beyond evil.
Like I said, it's beyond evil. It is fucked up. And I have been saying it's fucked up for ages now.
Yes, you have.
Delivering food in 60 days to someone who is already experiencing famine is nothing short of shedding crocodile tears over a starvation, aided and abetted by the Biden administration. This administration not only vetoed a humanitarian UN resolution to allow more food aid, but also provides the means for Israel to destroy Gaza's farmland and manufacturing sectors, which could have significantly mitigated the famine crisis. Like we see that in the West Bank where they're destroying olive trees, which also take a direct hit to the Palestinian economy. Sorry, I'm thinking about Philippines for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I do apologize.
And they're continuing their terrorism on the West Bank.
Exactly.
Oh, hello, Joe Logan's here.
More significantly, why would Biden need to dispatch American troops 5,000 miles to construct a floating pier in 8 weeks when the U.S. has already delivered to an Israeli port 20 miles north of Gaza enough fat flour to feed 1.5 million people for 5 months? This shipment of American flour is being held in the port of Ashdod because Israel has denied the U.S. permission to deliver it. Motherfucker, we fund your goddamn ass. Our fucking money keeps going over there to fund you, so why the hell should we have to ask for permission when you take our fucking money?
It makes no sense at all.
It makes no sense. These motherfuckers have been taking our money for years, and yet we're going to have to ask those motherfuckers for permission? Fuck that. I wouldn't send them another damn nickel.
Right, and that's how this could easily stop if the U.S. would stop being complicit in it.
Stop being little bitches.
Mm-hmm.
Given the Israeli-held U.S. aid shipment, the building of the floating pier appears to be a wasteful expenditure of the U.S. public money. I'm not saying taxpayer money because I am an MMTer.
Mm-hmm.
Not much different from the airdrops. These symbolic actions are only attempted to divert attention from the scale of suffering in Gaza. And such hollow gestures are designed for public relations, aimed at desensitizing the human conscience with false promises, all while empowering Israel to perpetuate its genocide both directly and indirectly. Like, seriously, though, we give them bastards 3.8. We just give them 14 billion, yet we have to ask motherfuckers that we fund to do shit? Seriously?
We wouldn't do it for anybody else.
No, because we're too busy kissing their ass is the problem.
And this whole genocide, Joe Biden, he's part of it.
Oh, he's been a part of it for years. Even when he was in the Senate, he voted on Palestinian genocide. Look at the settlements in the West Bank that he even condoned.
Mm-hmm.
Constructing a pier from scratch, particularly when U.S. aid has been sitting for over a month in an Israeli port just 25 miles away, raises significant logistical and security concerns, given the Biden administration's reluctance to coordinate with Palestinian officials. It begs the question, who will ultimately control the pier and thus the distribution of aid after completion? Palestinians are apprehensive that it may be handed over to the Israeli occupation forces, thereby granting Israel complete control over all access routes to Gaza by land and now by sea. Biden's indifference toward the 5 months-old genocide was starkly apparent in his calculated anti-Palestinian bias during his recent interview with BSDNC, where he urged Netanyahu to pay more attention to the innocent lives being lost. He implicitly suggested that Netanyahu was already paying some attention while murdering Palestinians, which he does not care about. He's never cared about them.
He
But
said
needed
that.
to be a little more cautious. Despite their pardon?
It's just so ridiculous. It really is.
I may need a second cigarette after reading this article. One might question whether such a statement stems from pure ignorance of history or a case in denial. Either way, I suspect it's more indicative of Biden's ingrained anti-Palestinian racism, wherein he fails to hear or see the pain of lesser humans. He's always seen people who are black and brown as lesser than human.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who did not grow up in the privilege of Delaware, I witnessed firsthand what Israel stands for. I was born and raised in a refugee camp for no reason other than my parents not being Jewish. They were deemed lesser humans whose well-being was dispensable to make way for European Jewish immigrants to take their homes. My parents embarked on their journey into a life of refuge just weeks before after one of the many Zionist massacres that paved the way for the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. That's after the Nakba. Few of the Zionist massacres were as documented as the massacre of the village in Deir Yassin, where Jewish terrorists, predecessors of today's Israeli army, systemically murdered 15% of the village's men, women, and children. In his memoir, the former Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin openly applauded the massacre, stating that the Deir Yassin massacre was not only necessary, but without it, the state of Israel could not be emerged. Israel was founded on murdering and maiming the natives of the ruins of Palestinian homes in 1948. This legacy persists into 2024, just 76 years later, people.
Mm-hmm.
Exemplified by starving 2.4 million Palestinians in Gaza, and perpetuate further by murdering 1 out of every 75 people, including 12,500 children and 73,124 wounded. Moreover, more than half of Gaza's homes are destroyed or damaged. 392 educational facilities obliterated. Only 1/3 of the hospitals are partially operational. 83% of groundwater wells out of service because the bastards put concrete and shit in it. And 267 mosques and churches destroyed. Even Christian churches were destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And yet Christians here in the U.S. still support this when they even bombed Christian churches.
It's sick.
And in Iraq, the Iraqis never went after the Christian churches nor the Christian people during that illegal invasion. They didn't stoop to the low that the U.S. government and the occupying government in Palestine is doing.
Right. This is all Zionism.
Mr. President, Israeli crimes in Gaza are consistent with what Israel stood for in the last 76 years. Absent of ending the genocide and lifting the 18-year-old Israeli blockade on Gaza, Biden's floating pier, like the airdrop, is a waste of time and money. This is especially true as the U.S. continues to provide aid to Israel and the means to starve and kill people we purportedly tried to save. Even the UN policy chief, Josep Borrell, put it best, addressing the apparent hypocrisy in the Biden administration on February 12th, when he said, "If you believe that too many people being killed, maybe you should provide less arms to prevent so many people being killed." Will Biden and Blinken heed Borrell's layman advice? Probably not.
Disgusting.
It's beyond disgusting.
Mm-hmm. And you know that Biden's in on it. The Biden administration is in on the whole thing, and just fake empathy from Biden is what it is. He don't care. He just wants to wipe them all out. He doesn't value life.
But yet, we've been funding them for how many years now? Have we sent money and shit to them?
Long time. Keep sending the money, and it's no good for the U.S. at all. I don't see how we benefit. All we're doing is getting involved in all these squabbles and stuff that Israel gets involved in. Israel says it has no friends. Well, they don't know how to act like friends. They want the whole region. And this whole normalization thing is totally ridiculous. When Israel's not going to keep its word.
They never do keep their word. When have you ever known of them to ever keep their word?
Never. Never. It's always lie upon lie.
It's lip service.
Basically it. That's
Pure outright lip service.
And this, you read with Biden, keep talking about it, Blinken will talk about this two-state. And it's like, while we're seeing what's going on in Gaza, while we're seeing what's going on in the West Bank, what reality do they live in? This violence has to stop. This Israeli terrorism has to stop. So that's
this violence does need to stop.
And that whole two-state, that's just a bunch of lip service. Yeah, here Bill says Israel has no friends, just a accomplices. Yeah.
You're right. Accomplices to genocide. The U.S. Our government, not the people of the U.S. per se, but it's our government officials, the UK government in particular, because they're the ones that created this mess during the Balfour Declaration
Mm-hmm.
and all that.
And that was illegal. That whole thing was illegal.
The whole Balfour Declaration was a crime against humanity.
And you just look at them like, who do they really think they are? That they could just do the things they do?
Like, who gives them any right to give land that's not even theirs to begin with? Like, what gives them any right to allow that to happen?
That's what I question. And I don't care how many times people will send me stuff saying, well, this is a reading of what it was about and why and all of that. But the point is, they had no right to do that. There's people living there. People are living there. What right do you have to take these people, disrupt their lives, kill mass amount of people, and just destroy their whole livelihood? Tell them they have to leave. And then you had the gang violence. Those gangs, and that's the one thing with I have to say with the late Queen Elizabeth, she never recognized them. She never went to Israel. Because, basically what happened with all the British troops that were over there, and she was not for any of this. They were just ruthless gangs, and I think the ruthless gangs twisted the arms of Britain. Because they were coming after them too. They weren't going to get their way.
I think all of that was done by like Theodore Herzl.
Yeah.
Like during the planning of the Zionist state.
Right, and then you had the gangs, that gang violence. They were thugs. They wanted their way, and that was it.
It was either their way or the highway.
And now, why does the U.S. act like they're Britain? The U.S. we're supposed to be a lot more powerful than Little Britain.
We should have stopped giving a shit about what Britain does in 1776. Where we live at currently is a former British colony.
Yeah.
So you would think the U.S. would know better than to go along with the colonialism that the British Empire. And then you have many people in Britain calling us colonizers and all that. Well, where do you think we learned that shit from?
Mm-hmm.
Like, people need to literally take a hard look at history. And like, even Spain colonized portions of North America. They even colonized places in Southeast Asia. So did the U.S. So did Britain.
Right. Then you had South America, and you had Mexico, and different places that this Spain was going to.
And then Portugal. You also, if you really want to look at another country that did colonialization, you had also Portugal, which also occupied where Brazil is.
Mm-hmm.
Brazil is a former Portuguese colony. Much of Central and South America was in the Southwest U.S. was colonized by Spain. Then you had France, which colonized most of Canada on down like a slither all the way down into Louisiana. And then you had everything east of the Mississippi, which was colonized by Britain.
And it just blows my mind at times, when I think back on all this. I just thinking you have the right where there's people living in these places, and you just have the right just to go in there and kill the people and claim it as yours. I mean, that's sick. That's a mental illness. It really is.
And even Britain, they've even, like Australia and New Zealand are former British colonies.
Yeah.
So is Fiji. Like, it's insanity.
It is insanity. Do you want to take the next article, Greg?
The Harats article you talking about? I don't. It's not letting me log into it for some reason.
Okay. I wonder why.
You can read that one.
I could.
While I rest my voice a little.
Okay, just comment along while I read. Okay. Here we go with Harats. And this is an opinion piece. If Gaza's children starve, Israel will lose its moral legitimacy, which to me, they've already done that. Children have begun dying of evident starvation. If Israel continues the war in Gaza while impeding the essential massive delivery of food aid, it will be seen as the primary author of one of the greatest humanitarian crises in modern memory. How awful. A Palestinian boy holds out an empty pot as he waits with other displaced Gazans, keen for meals provided by a charity ahead of the fast-breaking iftar meal during Ramadan in Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip. And it's just so horrible, his Ramadan, and this is how their Ramadan is. And this is by David Rothkopf, March 21st, 2024. The fighting in Gaza must stop. Not tomorrow, today. All available resources must immediately be directed to stopping the unprecedented famine that is underway in that embattled sliver of land that has already seen unspeakable suffering. As bad as the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th was, the people and government of Israel must now recognize that today, not just the country's security, but its legitimacy are at stake as never before. Should Israel continue the fighting and thus impede aid operations, should it continue to restrict those operations in any way, it will be seen as the primary author of one of the greatest humanitarian crises we have seen in modern history. Make no mistake, the horrific consequences of Israel's action in Gaza to date will be a hard legacy for the nation to bear, and one that will likely take decades and perhaps generations from which to fully recover. But what we have seen to date may pale in comparison to what is yet to come if the gravity of the current situation is not recognized and responded to with the utmost urgency. The Netanyahu government is apparently blind to this reality, ready to compound its disastrous decisions and outright crimes with something even worse. While the Prime Minister continues to obstinately and recklessly focus on pressing forward with a major new military operation in Rafah against the objections of the Biden administration, and as it seeks to shift blame for the humanitarian crisis in Gaza to Hamas. Now, that's a bunch of BS. None of this has to do with Hamas.
Has nothing to do with Hamas. This is all about ethnic cleansing and more genocide, all to appease the Zionists.
Exactly. And once again is showing the same blindness to a looming grave threat that it did prior to the Hamas terror attacks. Except this time the threat is even more dire both in human terms and terms of the potential long-term consequences of failing to address it. This is just horrific. It's just so sad. These children shouldn't have to be going through this.
Can you imagine the emotion, the hard emotional trauma that those children are having to endure? Like, I saw a video that was floating around on Facebook, children that had like injuries in their facial area, like purely shaking.
Yes.
Shaking because of this. Like I don't blame them for what they may do in the future. I really don't.
I don't.
I don't blame, and I will not condemn them either, because they asked for it, for traumatizing these children.
Children walk past the rubble of a collapsed building with a pot of food provided by a charity ahead of the fast-breaking iftar meal in Rafah, in the southern Gaza, this week. The international community's warnings to date of the potential for famine have been all but ignored by Israel. Its response have been wholly inadequate. In recent days, the alarms have been growing much louder because the situation on the ground is unfolding just as the prior warnings foretold. The Integrated Food Security Phase Classification is the international initiative by which global food crises are assessed. In December, it warned that a famine may occur by May if steps were not taken to aid the people of the region. Its most recent reassessment has, however, moved the date for the onset of such a calamity forward to as soon as this month. It stated plainly that, quote, famine is imminent as 1.1 million people, half of Gaza, experience catastrophic food insecurity. But even that chilling warning understates the gravity of the situation. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who has been actively and repeatedly warning of the need to prevent this outcome since before Israel's ground operation in Gaza began, referred to the IPC report when he stated, quote, according to the most respected measure of these things, 100% of the population in Gaza is at severe levels of acute food insecurity. He went on to note, quote, that's the first time an entire population has been so classified.
Not since the Great Famine in Ireland back many moons ago. Like the only people that can really relate to the Palestinians that I can think of are the people in South Africa and the people of Ireland. Like the people of Ireland has seen famine during the Irish potato famine. And in terms of apartheid, the people of South Africa can relate to the Palestinian people. That's why the ICJ ruling, that's why we saw so much immense support for the ICJ ruling out of Ireland and South Africa, because they see that the same struggles that they both endured, the Palestinians are dealing with it on the same level, if not worse.
Exactly.
And I saw something the other day where the number of children, the rate of children being murdered per day has more than surpassed the rate of children murdered during the Holocaust. So this here really does show a very stark contrast, that it shows that the people that the so-called quote unquote Israelis were running from in Europe, they have become the very thing that they sworn to be against. And I fear for the people in Gaza, and I fear for the people in the West Bank, which at the start of this, I told everybody, please do not take your attention off of the situation that's being carried out in the Gaza Strip. Don't let that take away the attention to the West Bank, because they would get the same stuff as well. And it's just really heartbreaking and harrowing to see.
It is.
How so many people support this nonsense.
Right. And it has escalated because they're looking at, in the West Bank, Israel is looking at the far right. It's like, well, people are watching what's going on in Gaza. They escalated what the attacks. And you always say, where is the world? Where is the world?
And why hasn't the world stopped to think about that?
Mm-hmm. In response, members of the U.S. Senate have called for an immediate cessation of Israeli military operations to enable the international community to take the steps to address the rapidly deepening crisis facing the people of Gaza. This whole situation, I just can't believe anything the U.S. says or just any of them say, because they've continually lied.
One lie behind the other. One lie behind the other. Like,
then they go back to what? They go back to October 7th.
They go back to Hamas this, Hamas that.
Make up in a bunch of garbage, propaganda. But meanwhile, reality, what's been going on in Gaza, I mean, why are they still talking about October 7th when this horror that's going on in Gaza, there's no reason for it. I just don't understand their minds, how you could do this to people. They don't even see their own terrorism, that they're the terrorist. And then they try to use that excuse saying, oh, that there was a ceasefire. Really? There was a ceasefire when Israel previously had been bombing Gaza. How is that a ceasefire?
The only ceasefire they want is when the last round kills the last Palestinian. That's the only ceasefire they support. Other than that, they don't support saving human lives at all.
There is no respect for human lives. And we've seen, or we've heard those rabbis, the way they talk, those right-wingers in Israel, they're terrible. They don't value life at all. And they teach that to these kids that are doing the horrific stuff in Gaza. Experts note that because humanitarian organizations are, quote, very cautious about using the term famine, calling the crisis, quote, imminent is misleading, because when those groups formally declare it is imminent, in practical terms, the famine is already well underway. That is why, for example, Refugees International has chosen to say the famine is already getting underway, meaning that famine level hunger is widespread, malnutrition as well. Deaths are beginning. And all of this is
Not to mention how deep extreme levels of dehydration to the point of where they have stopped producing tears because their body is trying to reserve the water to sustain itself.
And the Zionist Israelis, they're okay with this. This is what they do to people. Former USAID Administrator Gail Smith told me, quote, "We are already seeing death by starvation and are looking at an accelerating trajectory towards famine from now through May, and likely catastrophic famine by July." This has got to stop. This is just such evil. It's beyond evil. You don't even know, there's not even a word for just how evil this is. And this picture shows Palestinians flee the Israeli bombardment in central Gaza this week. And why should these people have to live like this? This is just...
They've been living like this since they were pushed into the Gaza Strip in 1948.
Yeah, never knowing when the Israeli terrorists were going to act. Jeremy Conendike, president of Refugees International, said, quote, "When children begin dying of evident starvation, as we're now seeing, that is indicative of extreme, sustained deprivation. Given the overwhelming levels of food deprivation and rapidly accelerating malnutrition in the last reporting, doubled since January, this famine is building momentum very rapidly." Quote, there will a lot of kids right now who are at the level of advanced malnutrition that the dying kids were approximately 4 weeks ago. The numbers still keep rising until something major changes the trajectory. And Israel and the USA, nothing.
We need to make them a pariah state.
It's just pure evil. It's just evil beyond evil.
Whenever it's like there's sporting events and such, and they're having to play the Israeli team, they beat the shit out of them in the events, and they're refusing to even shake the hands of the Israeli players.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why should anybody shake their fucking hands?
And
you want a handshake for committing genocide? The hell with that.
Yeah, just evil. And Israel doesn't... I just don't... Well, it's they have these people so programmed that they don't even see the evil that they're committing.
Total indoctrination. And also their education system, which teaches all of this as well.
Right, they tell them, what was that song? There was a song we heard the kids singing in a classroom, and then another time on a bus, they were singing that all the world hates Arabs. This is how they're raising their kids and singing these type of songs. And it's
You
like,
know,
no, the world doesn't hate Arabs at all. And that's just a terrible thing to teach kids. What does that mean in terms of numbers? Cottondyke explains, quote, I suspect that even with an immediate and fully robust intervention, would still see starvation-related deaths in the thousands if such a response takes another month or more to roll out. I wouldn't be surprised to see death tolls in the tens of thousands. And this is what it's so aggravating that these different lawmakers, they just sit there and they talk and they read from papers and they do this and that. Action is needed. Get in there, do something, and don't say you can't because of Israel. That's a bunch of BS. The U.S. can definitely get in there and stop it. Quote, as a reference point, the mortality threshold for famine declaration is 2 deaths per 10,000 population per day, reaching an extremely high level. In northern Gaza, that would be 60 plus dying per day, which feels plausible given the conditions there. At that level, the 300,000 people in northern Gaza alone would exceed 1,000 dead in 17 days. Oh, it's
it's
just
like there's no words to explain this.
no.
Like, there are literally no words to explain how wrong and messed up this really is.
And they're all complicit in this, doing this to people. People that are just nice people that just want to live their lives. You know, they have a wonderful sense of community, wonderful people, good people, and they're doing this too. And like you said, there's just no words for it. Quote, if this drags out for another few months and half the population reaches the level of deprivation that exists in the North, again, plausible. It's not hard to see a path to tens of thousands dead. If cholera were to hit, so far, mercifully it hasn't, those numbers would get much higher. Quote, it's important to understand the trajectory of famine, observed Smith drawing on her USAID experience. Quote, people facing food insecurity fall back on a series of coping mechanisms. They eat whatever they have in store, sell their assets to generate cash to buy food, go from 2 or 3 meals to 1 meal a day, and adults eat less so that children can eat. Quote, as the ability to counter food insecurity decreases, malnutrition increases. Famine happens when there are no coping mechanisms left and malnutrition has reached life-threatening levels. And Joe Biden is doing nothing to stop this. He has the power. He's had the power to stop this, and he has not. Don't say Netanyahu in Israel. Biden has had the ability from the start to stop this.
Yes, he did. Like he had the total ability where he could have easily withheld all funds going to Israel and stop sending military aid, and that would easily stop this madness. Like, seriously, like the only way you would put a stop to something like that is to cut the head off the snake in terms of cutting off all their funding and stop sending all forms of military aid. Like even Ron Paul says that foreign aid does not help anything.
Hmm. Look at this picture. Smoke plumes billow after Israeli bombardment over Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip this week. They don't give a shit. They're just horrible. The Israelis are horrible people. The Zionists are horrible people. And the sad thing is that the Zionists, the media, they have the public okay with this. Quote, we will see a huge number of deaths, but also effects for years to come, she continued. We will see an increase in stunting among children under 5, and infants are particularly at risk, as we know that the nutrition available or not during the first 1,000 days in a child's life shapes that child's ability to thrive and learn over a lifetime. The psychological cost of famine, including long-term learning challenges, endure for decades after a serious famine. Just terrible. And we know the people of Gaza, are highly educated people and they value education.
Well, they don't really value education. They value more so indoctrination than anything. Like, truly, what they're doing like their hatred toward the Palestinian people is just like the hatred that white people here in the U.S. have for black and brown people. It's the same racist indoctrination, just a different country.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the colonialist mindset, like to indoctrinate people and have them hating people and all that.
Right, and they're the ones, the Zionists were the ones that started this whole, what they call Islamophobia, this whole anti-Arab thing. That's the Zionists spreading it in the media.
Yeah, it's not only indoctrination within the schools, but it's also the media indoctrination as well. So you have two aspects playing hand in hand with each other. You have the educational indoctrination, and then you have the mainstream media indoctrination, which we have here in the US, which preaches hate. And there's like a quote that I shared out earlier. It says, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing.
And that is a fact.
And that's by Malcolm X.
Yeah, and we see it everywhere. And we see it right now. Okay, Smith gave further examples of famine's cost in lives and human development. Quote, in famine or near famine conditions, other ailments are lethal, An economic recovery is often elusive, as after most famines, people aren't able to restore lost assets for decades. So there is rarely a return to normal. And if they do survive, most people are left more vulnerable than they were before the onset of a crisis. All the experts with whom I spoke stated that so far the response to Gaza's famine has been wholly inadequate, both from Israel and from an international community hindered by the fighting and other Israeli impediments to intervention. It has lacked the needed, quote, large interventions to restore food access at scale, comprehensive malnutrition interventions, adequate supplies of clean water, and provisions of health care that are essential. And it seems that the USA is not doing anything because you see Israel not doing anything. The USA should be stepping and doing something. Biden
Well, the
should be doing
U.S. is
something.
not going to do nothing because they are complicit in this. Look at how many U.S. politicians, like, look at the recent TikTok ban at the 352 members of Congress, which are, in fact, puppets of IPAC and many other pro Zionist organizations. Look at Joe Biden, which also takes money from pro Zionist organizations. Everybody that is in the administration is not going to do nothing because they're too controlled.
Mm-hmm. It's sickening. It really is sickening. We've got to get rid of this, the power that the Zionists have, because this is just pure evil what's happening here. In this picture here, a Palestinian child carries vegetables as another tries to salvage more from a refrigerator inside their damaged home, following overnight Israeli bombardment in Rafah in southern Gaza. It's just disgusting. It's so evil.
I'll be right back.
Okay. Smith argued that it is high time that the international humanitarian organizations that specialize in addressing such crises be given the support and freedom they need to operate in Gaza. That means an end to the fighting indefinitely. Quote, if the race to avert catastrophic famine is lost, she states, it will not be the fault of aid groups. Responsibility should be laid firmly at the feet of the politicians whose responsibility it is to create such conditions. That means, first and foremost, the Israeli government, but it also means all the nations of the world who are in a position to help right now. The blame shifting and inflamed rhetoric and political posturing and disastrous decision making that have brought us to this awful point must stop. Fundamental decency requires it. But so too does the recognition that the failure to effectively intervene now to end the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza will be a moral stain on the reputation of Israel from which the country may never recover. And David Rothkopf is a former senior U.S. government official and the author of 10 books on foreign policy and politics. And he also has a podcast. He's also a podcast host and CEO of the DSR Podcast Network. And he really spelled it out. And I was talking to Jeff earlier, Greg and Madeline. And when you hear the term generational curses, this type of thing will be a curse on all those that support this genocide. This is just pure evil and just basic laws of the universe and physics. There's the evil that the people in Israel, the Israeli government, all the people that are behind all of this, they're not going to get away with this. I mean, there's just going to be this, whether it's generational, there's going to be generational curses definitely with these people. They're not going to get away with it, but it's just an evil that Israel's not going to come out of. People knowing, seeing, witnessing what they're capable of, what they did. I don't think people really thought that they would ever see such evil coming from Israel. We'd seen their terrorism, what they did, what they do, but this now, just seeing it in Gaza. I mean, just last year we saw in the mosque, Alaska Mosque. We saw them beating up the worshipers and stuff like that. This is just, they get away with this. But they're not going to, I mean, this is just such evil that people will forever look at Israel differently. And just the people, because we've heard from the people over there and the stuff they say, it's just so evil that even if you are indoctrinated into something, but then actually doing stuff like the murdering people and having people starve and not even caring, there's got to be serious consequences for their actions. But definitely Israel is cursed from this. This is something
They have blood on their hands, like literal blood of the dead Palestinians.
Mm-hmm. And that's not something that they're gonna
like, that's nothing to have bragging rights about.
No. Oh yeah, Andy brought up a good point. Not just Biden. Turkey still lets fuel and supplies go through their country to Israel. Yes, I saw that, and that's infuriating. Because Turkey should have stopped that. And Andy says, I've been catching myself staring into the void and crying, thinking about Palestinians unexpectedly. It's giving depression like hell. It's that's it. It's just so hard for us to see this, and then to think this is reality. This is what people are actually doing to other people. You know, there's one thing if something happened, a crisis happened, and it was due to, say, an earthquake, a flood, or just a catastrophe. But this is just intentionally done by Netanyahu and his government. They're intentionally doing this and then trying to switch it up like they're the victim. It's just ridiculous. And these people trying to scream out about Hamas, and the UN has clearly stated they're a resistance group. They're a resistance group. Israel has been attacking them. They attacked them prior to October 6th. And look at everything they were doing to the people of Gaza. And they try to play the victim. And with a bunch of made up stories. If things were so catastrophic, why were stories having to be made up? And yet they had their own army bombing their own people and shooting.
I could not fathom the sheer trauma of these children and everything that they have seen. That's the biggest kicker for me.
Right, and these kids are going to have to move forward somehow. Some of them have lost their whole families. It's just their whole life. They just want to go back to a life the way it was. Getting up in the morning, having breakfast, going to school, just a normal life. And everything was destroyed. And here, you see these some of these soldiers laughing and saying, "Oh, I'm gonna make a steak for dinner. This, that, and the other thing." And they're doing it just to say, "Well, to Gaza, this is what, we have. We have food. We have this, and we have that."
Like, I saw the TikTok videos going around of the Israelis. Well, I don't even consider them that. The occupiers,
Mm-hmm.
like in their homes, showing off all the food in their refrigerators, all the fancy amenities that they have in their homes, from electricity to running water, a hot shower, like the things that, and they are literally throwing that into, like, they're throwing that into the faces of the Palestinians who have been suffering since the Nakba of 1948, like literally mocking them. And I saw a photo the other day of a white couple from Brooklyn, New York, who lives in a house in the West Bank that was once owned by that was stolen from a Palestinian couple.
Yeah. How do you do that? How do you do that? A person of decency wouldn't do that. And now in New Jersey, they have more of those real estate events going on in synagogues for the next couple of weekends. Yeah, here, settle in some stolen land. It's just sick.
It's beyond sick. It's purely and outright disgusting.
It is.
It just breaks my heart to see the level of
And especially watching these people not doing anything. You hear all these words and no action to stop this. And then trying to blame it on Hamas. That just, it's just such a BS. But they know the world doesn't, most of the people don't follow things going on. And so they just throw things out for people who don't know any better. So they listen to what the TV says, and they think, oh, it's Hamas. And they think, oh, Israel didn't do anything. They have no clue.
And Andy, I want to tell you about your last sentence of what you just said about the depression. Like, hell, feel free to message Dear anytime. We're there for you, and we also feel your pain that they're going through. We'd love to have conversations with you and all that. Like, don't hesitate to reach out. Please don't. We won't bite.
And this has been going on for so long. That's what's so infuriating. Infuriating that it's so long, and the damage, destroying, history, destroying all the human lives they destroyed. The families. You look at the poets, the educators, the journalists, and the doctors, the nurses, just all the people. And they try to say, oh, the resistance. Oh, they voted for that, the group of people. Well, so what? Israel voted for Netanyahu and the whole terrorist ring that they have in there. A bunch of right-wing nut jobs that don't respect human life at all. Gaza, they just, look at all the churches, the mosques, and, the beautiful buildings. It just, the universities. None of it makes sense. And you clearly see that it was the intent all along was to just wipe out a culture, try to wipe out a history. And the audacity to do that, it's just so sick.
It's beyond sick.
And you see how we're all trying to do something, and you just see that you feel so powerless to stop all this, that we have a bunch of nut jobs in office. And Madeline was getting very upset because there were people commenting on her timeline that that they need to reelect Biden because Trump will be worse. Trump's more evil. And it's like they're both evil. You see what
Right,
Biden's
Jill,
doing.
They're attacking right now, especially now that they see that Jill Stein has gained more popularity. They're seeing her start to surge in the polls, which I suspect she will start really surging in the polls between now and November. Like, their attacks are growing even more desperate. It's like insanity.
It is insanity. But we can't have either. We can't have either in office. Either, neither. Let's see my vocabulary. But we can't. We can't have people that are okay with genocide, because Trump himself was saying, well, my advice to Netanyahu is just to get it over with. And that's disgusting. So there is no value, and Trump is just very much saying that he's a Zionist, and he's, buddying with Netanyahu. And
that's why he that's why he announced that the capital move from the embassy moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Yeah, he's doing whatever he can.
Regardless of who we elect, we're still going to see a Zionist puppet. But if we elect Jill Stein, who is not a Zionist puppet, then we can see some change in the world. Even RFK is losing support over his pro-Israel stuff.
Right, he wants the Zionist money.
Like, he is seeing his polling numbers tank because he will not step away from the burning building.
Mm-hmm. And you were saying about Jesse Ventura.
Yeah. Like, I've even heard where I've seen like rumors that he has even stepped away from RFK. Like Jesse Ventura should have never went to RFK to begin with. He should have went with somebody like Jill Stein of the Green Party and all that. Like his name recognition alone, if he was picked as Jill's running mate, would really get the Green Party going.
Oh, most definitely. Because this is the time in history, because it's thrown out into people's faces. They're seeing with their own eyes the evil. To see what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank. I mean, this Zionism's got to stop. They've gotten too powerful, and they've been allowed. They've been allowed to be in the positions they're in and the power they're in. And really, they're a small group of people. But the power they have, it shouldn't be. There's got to be laws made against stuff like this. Because we see with our government shouldn't be beholden to a foreign entity. And this foreign entity shouldn't have the right to hold the power, especially, with the campaigns and stuff like that. That campaign financing is just so wrong. It's just so wrong. The whole thing is wrong.
That's why we need to dump the corruption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dump the Zionist power, because we see it. We see it here in the U.S. and other avenues. You see it at the colleges. I mean, the children who are going to school, the young people, the Arab Americans, they get taunted. You have people that stand with Palestine. They don't want to see the horrors that the Palestinians are going through, and they have the right to express that. Nobody should be on the side of genocide. But here you have the Zionists sticking their head in to the situation and trying to say, oh, it's anti-Semitic to say free Palestine. And Greg, as we've always said, they don't know what anti-Semitism is, because Arabic is the largest
Semitic group in the world.
Yes. And so there's got to be this fight back with the Zionism, because it's gone too far. It's too powerful, and we see what happens with people who run for office and people that are in office. You saw what happened with Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, we saw that with when we covered the labor files, which I brought that up to really expose the grotesque levels of corruption and how they control even foreign governments. Like we hear the argument all the time that, the Democrats are controlled by China and the Republicans are controlled by Russia. There's no proof of that either.
No.
But on the other hand, they have a mutual compromise to a foreign entity, and that's Israel.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And they go over there and they sit there and gravel for money. And they take the tour of Israel, of where Netanyahu or whoever's in government wants them to go, to explicitly get the Israeli narrative. AIPAC, we saw that with AIPAC, explaining to them, this is the narrative. This is the narrative. There is no starvation in Gaza. Don't believe your eyes. They're telling them what they should say during their campaigns. And then this whole TikTok thing, the Zionists are behind that. Was it the American Jewish Federation we saw? No, the National Jewish Federation behind the whole issue with TikTok, because the Zionist narrative, no one wants to hear it. Has no power at all. People see with their own eyes what's going on. So, they want the narrative of how the Israelis want you to see things, and that's wrong too. So we're all got to stand up, but I know a lot of people are, to stop this whole TikTok situation. And there's a Zionist that wants to buy TikTok as well. That's what it is. This whole Zionists want to take over everything and sell you what they want you to believe. And that whole thing.
I wonder how George Carlin feels about Israel, or how he felt about Israel.
It's
Let's see here.
The whole thing is just with what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank, the Zionism, enough is enough. I don't want to hear you talking about anti-Semitism and all that other BS. The Greater Israel Plan, you just think you could just go around ethnically cleansing people and expanding into their region, taking over. Enough is enough. I mean, we're seeing the sickness and the evilness of it. And then claiming that some people are human and others aren't. Because
I found this.
Okay.
This will be the closing video for the night.
Okay, that sounds great.
Force, smug, greedy, well-fed white people have invented a language to conceal their sins. It's as simple as that. The CIA doesn't kill anybody anymore. They neutralize people, or they depopulate the area. The government doesn't lie. It engages in disinformation. The Pentagon actually measures nuclear radiation in something they call sunshine units. Israeli murderers are called commandos. Arab commandos are called terrorists. Contra killers are called freedom fighters.
You hear what he said about Israelis?
Yeah.
But in reality, they're the ones that's the terrorists.
Mm-hmm. They brought terrorism to the region.
They have essentially worked toward total destabilization of the Middle East. The final piece to the destabilization puzzle was Iraq, and now they have. Now it wasn't quite there with Iraq, but now in Palestine, what's going on with the Gaza Strip, that right there is really is going to destabilize their relations with their neighbors. The only reason why they wanted Israel and Saudi Arabia to quote unquote do normalization is for the Greater Israel Plan, which encompasses all of Saudi Arabia. Like, they would have even taken Yemen and Oman with them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were even going to take Kuwait, Qatar, all of it. And Qatar would go along with it. I believe it.
And I know the people are furious of Saudi Arabia. They're furious. They want no part of Israel. They don't want any friendliness with them. And we're seeing that, the people should be listened to, and these governments, it's like they're getting swarmed in. They have to stay away from the evilness, because I just see Israel as pure evil. It is just pure evil. And it's, like we say, 1948 Israel. People try to get confused with religious books. It has nothing to do with it.
They have tried to, like, I could tell you just about as much truth as that fucking book. Like, every Bible that I have ever seen even tried to lie.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible, all of it, when in reality, that was a predominant Muslim country before the occupation began. And did you see that video where Netanyahu, as you like to call him,
Mm-hmm.
drew a line from like where the Gaza Strip is all the way out to the Persian Gulf or something?
Mm-hmm. He's disgusting. He's an evil, evil, evil creature. And he had that map when in September at the UN. He stood there and called it all Israel. There was no Palestine or Jordan on it. It was just all Israel.
Mm-hmm. Like, even on that map, there was no Jordan or any of it.
No. And, March of last year, who was it? It was Smotrich. I believe he was at an event. I think it was a funeral. And he went and talked about the Greater Israel thing and had a map. And, there is no such thing.
The UN would not go along with that either.
Right. According to them, there's no such thing as Palestinian people. There's no such thing as Palestine. That it was all made up. I mean, it's ridiculous. And this is the stuff that they sell to the people in Israel.
This has been sold to them for so long, it's unreal.
And some of them think it's true. That they're just... It's a society where the people are just...
Like we said, it's total indoctrination.
Right. Indoctrination. They don't live in reality. They live in a screwed up reality. If they leave that area, walk around and say the stuff they're saying, people think they have really got a screw loose. Well, the woman who had left there and was living in Australia, I heard her talking, and she was saying,
like, I've been seeing all across TikTok where younger, like millennial and Gen Z age people are like wanting to, like, I saw this, like, it was a clip. It's been several clips that I've been seeing where the millennials and Gen Z are willing to never purchase land there and just allow it to be given back to the Palestinians. They don't feel comfortable living there.
That's good news.
Like the ones that have not been indoctrinated.
Right. Because this woman, it took her to go to Australia to actually see and realize how indoctrinated she was.
Look at what the talking about the Australians there for a minute and and how the British colonized that from the Aborigines, which were the native Australians.
Mm-hmm. Well, this woman said, which we've talked about on the show, how they are, but you walk around in fear of Arabs. In Israel, they have you so fearful. Like, enemies are everywhere.
I have many Muslim friends on my Facebook, probably about 30 or 40. who I remain in contact with. There's like 2 or 3 of them I really am close with, and they try to paint a picture that Muslims are horrible people, like they don't support progressive ideas. Like the ones that I'm friends with will actually take during Pride Month and go to like Pride events in their community and actually show that Muslims are not anti-LGBTQIA. Like the ones that I am very close friends with, they are 100% in support of LGBTQIA rights, and they are even deathly terrified of what's happening here in the U.S. in terms of the trans issue.
Mm-hmm. And Andy says, of course, Butcher is in on it. It's a strategic position to get at Iran. Yeah, and Iran is being smart about. They're very smart. We've read a lot of articles from them. And they know the game USA and Israel play. And this whole thing trying to say, oh, they that Iran is a part of all of this, and Iran. They always use Iran as like the boogeyman. And meanwhile, it's the USA and Israel. Well, the USA just acts on whatever Israel wants it to. Is the problem? And when they talk about peace in the Middle East, well, the problem is Israel. And not wanting to coexist with other people there. Now you come to a region and you want to take it over, that's not going to go well. Anybody that does such a thing, it's not going to go over well. But its day is pretty much numbered when you really see what's going on. And you see that they don't have the military equipment they need. They really don't have what they need. They don't have the people. And they're getting the people, a lot of the soldiers are getting their asses kicked in over in Gaza. They don't show or let the people know.
After what happened to that gentleman, Aaron Bushnell, I've been hearing reports that there has been a new mass exodus of people signing the documents to leave the U.S. military because they don't want to go over and fight in the Middle East anymore.
No,
not they are even being like veterans are even taking on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, like sharing articles and such for early what the hell's that term?
Early release.
Early, yeah.
For the most part, people didn't know a lot that was going on in the region. And they're seeing more now, and there's more of an understanding. I mean, we were sold a big lie. We've been sold big lies forever. And this whole issue in the Middle East is one big lie. And, Biden looks at it as other neocons will look at it, as just, what should I say, whitening the region. You keep bringing more white Jewish people into the region and expanding and taking over other countries. So they're okay with murdering and slaughtering Arabs in whatever country they're in. People don't want to be a part of that. That's just pure evil. And they don't see themselves as being the evil ones.
Not by a long shot. Not
Well,
by a long shot at all.
no. And the audacity to stand up. They stand up in front of crowds and talking, and the Zionists just talk like they're the victims and they have to do all this stuff. You're not victims at all. You started this crap. You went into somebody else's territory, you terrorized it, and you're continually doing it, and they want the whole region. And you blame it on Arab people who have lived there. People live in their regular everyday lives. Then you have a group of people coming over and and nobody, how would you react to that?
I'd be pissed off.
Exactly. You'd be fighting back. You wouldn't take the crap.
And I'm not one to take any shit either.
No. There was this, I had seen this, this story about a woman that was saying her grandmother had said that she wouldn't take her home. That there was, they didn't know that when they docked over in Israel, goes back to 1948, the house still had the breakfast dishes on the table. Didn't realize that they were just going in and these people were being shoved out of their houses and being kicked out, and that they were being kicked off their land. They had no idea. Some of these people had no idea. And her grandmother was like, no, that she couldn't do that. How could I do to somebody else what was done to us? But then again, there's other people that see no problem with it. It's just sick. It's mentally sick to think you could do that.
It's repulsive.
And then you hear Kushner repeating pretty much what we've been hearing others talking about. Daniela Weiss and all of them. It's the seaside properties and building settlements in Gaza. Kushner had to say that too about cleaning it out and valuable waterfront property. I'm like, you people are evil, just evil. They just say these things after just what's going on there. They have no souls. You have to say that. They have none.
Not at all.
No. But I think, Greg, do you have anything more you want to say?
Not at all, other than don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, follow. Don't forget to turn on those notification bells, and hit up Dee's Cash App and leave her some stars so she can buy her some Palestinian brand coffee from from one of many Palestinian owned coffee companies, so she can also help support the Palestinian people. Y'all should do the same as her. And have a great night, everyone.
Yes, and I just want to thank Greg so much for being here with me and for a great conversation. We always have great conversations. It's tough topics, but it's stuff that really has to be spoken about. And I just want to say, please share anything you get about, what's happening in Gaza, in the West Bank. Not everybody sees what you see. And the word has to get out there. This has got to stop, as we've said. It's got to stop, and we have to do the best we can by sharing information. Yeah, and Greg, you've seen people with GoFundMe's and different avenues that seeking money.
Yeah, if you see, if y'all want to join my group, Revolution Evolution, and please share any mutual aid posts that you see. Feel free to do that, because the more mutual aid that we promote, the better.
Right, people need our help, and if you can't, if you don't have the money, that's fine. But just please share it, so that somebody
sharing that stuff out is a lot more effective than you think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you may not be able to afford it like many people, but at least share the stuff out, because who knows, somebody may be able to donate maybe $1 or $2.
Right. It's so important. As we see, the people are starving, and we've got to do the best we can.
Like you've seen earlier, that image of that little girl eating out of a refrigerator.
It was horrific. The whole thing is horrific, and it's just so difficult to actually see what's going on over there. And I'm sure, obviously, it's to actually live in that. Oh my God. It's just no words that for people that have to live that every single day. That has what their daily life has turned into because of Zionism. It's just, so we've got to do the best we can to try to help out.
Exactly.
And on that note, I'm just going to thank everybody. Andy, Steve, Joe Logan was here, and thank you for everybody that didn't comment. Thank you for being here. And as Greg said, please share the show out. We appreciate you being here.
Have a good night, everyone.
Yes,
I'm
good
out.
night. And good night, and free Palestine.